Son Goku from Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball Super, and of course Dragon Ball Evolution started off as a little boy who could survive being shot in the head and still be able to flip a car over immediately afterwards, and ever since his debut in late 1984, he's grown to literal god levels of strength and could easily destroy countless planets without even breaking a sweat if he wanted to, which makes him the Japanese equivalent to Superman, so needless to say, it'd be pretty difficult for any characters outside of his own franchise to step up to him, what with his power jumping the shark a long time ago. However, given the unique nature of stand abilities from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, there's actually more than a handful of characters from that franchise who could actually beat Goku in a fight, regardless of the massive difference in power. And in case you're not aware, stands are basically more or less ghosts that people can control who all have their own unique abilities, and the only way for a stand to be beaten is if it receives direct damage from another stand. However, if one doesn't have a stand of their own, then not only are they not going to be able to do damage to another stand directly, but they're not even going to be able to see or hear one either, in which case, the only other way to win is by defeating the actual user controlling it, which wouldn't be all that hard for someone like Goku, seeing as how stand users are just ordinary people, or animals, or vampires, or just about any living thing, really. But despite all of Goku's gigantic and obvious advantages, though, there's still plenty of characters from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure who are capable of whooping his booty, so in the name of fun, I decided to compile them all into a list, but since there's way too many of them for one video, I'm gonna divide them all up based on which JoJo parts they all appear in, starting with the story that introduced stands in the first place, Stardust Crusaders, aka Part 3. But before I begin, though, let me make it abundantly clear that I'm not saying that these stand users would beat Goku, but rather that they could beat him, especially since he's addicted to challenges and probably wouldn't go all out right off the bat, and even if he actually told him some of the things that stands were capable of, there's a pretty good chance that he'd actually let his curiosity get the better of him. Also, the Goku I'm going to be using for reference will be from Dragon Ball Super's Broly movie, which is the most recent point in the anime, because much like most English speakers, I honestly haven't been reading the manga ever since the anime ended, and we all know that GT was never canon to begin with, but with all that being said though, make sure to sit back in your stepdad's favorite chair, press the subscribe button if you like games, goofs, glory, and sometimes anime, and allow me, YouTube's toughest prune salesman, Cameron all one word, to tell you 7 stand users from Stardust Crusaders who could potentially beat Goku in a fight. Before I forget though, I am legally required to tell you that there will be minor kinda sorta spoilers though. Nothing story related or anything like that, but I am going to be explaining abilities and talk about examples of how they were used. But anyway, number 1. Manish Boy with his stand Death 13. Despite being an 11-month-old baby, Manish Boy is somehow capable of critical thinking, and more importantly, he's got a stand that can completely take control of your dreams while you're sleeping, and any kind of damage he does to you during these dreams will carry over into the real world, much like Freddy Krueger. I mean, Goku would obviously have to fall asleep nearby the baby for him to have a chance, but if that actually were to happen, which I could easily imagine many scenarios where it actually might, then Death 13 would have full control over everything inside of Goku's dream, and if Goku were to somehow wake up before he was killed, he wouldn't even remember anything that happened inside of the dream, so he wouldn't think to attack the baby, nor would he assume that it was anything other than a nightmare unless he had a limb missing or something like that anyway. But even then, I doubt he'd blame it on the baby. Plus, if Goku did wake up and realize what was going on, I still can't imagine that he'd actually harm a baby, even though I'm well aware of the fact that the character isn't as much of a goody two-shoes in the Japanese manga and dub as he is in the English versions. A fact that Akira Toriyama's not too happy with, by the way. Number 2. Anubis. This right here is one of the most unique stands in all of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, in that its original user was a blacksmith named Caravanserai who bound the stand to a sword where it remained for 5 centuries after the user died. Whenever anybody picks this sword up, Anubis completely takes the person's mind over and makes him do whatever it wants him to, which makes it pretty self-explanatory how it could be Goku should he ever pick the sword up in the first place. I mean, to be fair, he probably never would, but, you know, if he did. Number 3. Vanilla Ice with his stand Cream. Ordinarily, being a vampire would help in just about any fight imaginable as long as it takes place at night, but since Goku's strong as ass, I don't think it's gonna help Vanilla Ice all that much here. However, not only is he named after my wife's favorite classical musician and ice cream flavor / bedroom position, but he's also got a stand that's pretty damn tough to beat on top of that. It's basically a stand that's got a portal inside of its mouth that can transport anything to another dimension that immediately disintegrates everything that goes there, except for the stand itself and its user. And sure, it would be easy enough for Goku to kill the user in like a billionth of a second, but the kicker here is that Cream can devour itself along with Vanilla Ice to become an invisible and undetectable floating ball that erases anything it touches by transporting it to the previously mentioned dimension. And I suppose it is possible that since Goku's unbelievably strong, that he might actually be able to survive in another dimension if he had some kind of a barrier up. Plus, he has been known to teleport in between dimensions in the past. But since this portal ball only transports what it's actually touching, it's not like Goku would be sent there with his entire body, but rather it'd be sending him one molecule at a time, so yeah, he would die if it touched him. Despite the fact that you can't see or detect this void though, what with it being in another dimension and all, you can still see everything that it's destroying, so Goku would have a pretty good general idea of where it is, and compared to Goku, it moves around slow as poop, and since Vanilla Ice needs to be in another dimension to become the void ball in the first place, he's got no idea of seeing where he's going, which means he just gotta come back and take a peek every now and then, which Goku would most likely instantly attack him, assuming he didn't die as soon as the fight began. Number 4. Alessi with his stand Sethin. Alright, so this one's probably the least likely on this list to actually be able to beat Goku in a fight, but if Alessi could somehow get Goku to stand in his shadow, then his age will rapidly reverse until Goku eventually becomes a fetus, and based on the fact that Jojo couldn't use his stand anymore after he reverted back into a child, then I'd imagine that Goku's power would also revert back to whatever it was at the age he reverted back to as well. It took about 10 seconds for a woman in her 20s standing in Alessi's shadow to revert back into being a fetus, and a 22-year-old Polnareff 1 second to become an 8-year-old again. But the problem with that is that Goku's physically 39 years old in the Broly movie after factoring the years he spent in the time chamber, as well as all the years he was dead, so it'd probably take Sethin around 20 seconds to turn Goku into a defenseless fetus. And since Goku'd probably still whip Alessi's ass if he were a 4-year-old, turning Goku into a fetus would literally be the only way he could possibly lose. And honestly, I just can't imagine that Goku'd stand there for that long like a goon and let it happen to him, even if he were asleep. But then again, Goku has been known to be pretty vulnerable while he's asleep, so if he's not being attacked by a baby in his dreams, I suppose it is possible for Alessi to turn him into a fetus. Number 5. Rubber Soul with his stand Yellow Temperance. Yellow Temperance is a blob that's bound to and covers its user Rubber Soul, and it's also one of the only stands in the entire series that non-stand users could actually see and touch, which does give Goku a huge advantage, but the problem is that it's indestructible, thus making Rubber Soul invincible if it's covering his entire body, and even worse, if Goku touches the goo himself, then it can engulf his entire body and kill him instantly. Although, since Goku typically uses ki even with his physical attacks, I'd imagine that this might actually protect him from assimilation, and there's a pretty good chance that he might start the battle off with a blast anyway, especially with how suspicious Yellow Temperance looks. Plus, while this stand does make its user invincible when he engulfs himself in the goo, he still needs to breathe and he'll have to come out for air, especially if he were to find himself in water, and if Goku were to keep blasting from a distance, then I'd imagine that Rubber Soul would eventually end up in water sooner or later. But I'm sure Goku would just use his speed to instantly attack Rubber Soul the second he exposed himself before it ever came to using ki blasts. And you know, it might even be possible for Goku to use instant transmission to send a blast to the inside of Yellow Temperance by sensing Rubber Soul's ki. So Goku would most likely win this one, but if he were to somehow touch Yellow Temperance, then there's a pretty good chance he'd actually die before he even got a chance to attack, so I wouldn't write Rubber Soul off altogether. Number 6. Daniel Darby with his stand Osiris. The way Osiris works is that if you make a bet with its user Darby and place your soul on the line, usually in a game of poker, then your soul will take the form of a poker chip should you lose, and Darby may or may not do inappropriate things with it later on when nobody's looking. I don't think he does, but, you know, he might. Your soul turns into a chip the second you believe in your heart that you lost, even if your opponent's only bluffing. And if either party can cheat without the other one noticing, then they'll be allowed to get away with it. So Goku could probably use his speed to look at Darby's cards without him even noticing. However, in a game like poker, Goku probably wouldn't know how to cheat or even play fairly to begin with. And to make matters worse, Darby happens to be extremely good at cheating, meaning that Goku would virtually have no chance at winning and probably lose his soul. Well, I mean, that's if he agreed to bet his soul in a game of poker in the first place anyway, which had never happened to begin with, but, you know, if Goku did, then he'd lose 10 times out of 10. Number 7. Terence Darby with his stand Tomb. Terence is the Darby brother of the previous entry, who has a stand that's pretty much the same thing for the most part, except rather than playing poker, he chooses to wager his souls over NES/Famicom games, and probably any other kind of game he wants, I suppose. If I had to bet, then I'd say that Goku'd probably get good at video games before poker, given how fast his reflexes and reaction time are, but even so, this Darby brother still has the advantage of having played all these games for countless hours in the past and knowing all the tricks and all that. And as if that wasn't enough, he could also predict Goku's every move with his soul reading technique without Goku even being aware of it. Again, much like a poker game, I highly doubt that Goku'd bet his soul over a Famicom game, because even if Darby were capable of wreaking any kind of havoc on Goku's life that might make him take a bet to undo it, Goku'd probably just undo the damage with the Dragon Balls instead. But still though, Goku has been known to be a little bit naive in the past, so there is always the chance that Goku'd get conned into making the bet. But anyway, that's my list. Feel free to make any kind of arguments or say whatever you want in the comments below, but before you do, just know that even though Goku could bypass some abilities like being turned into candy by Majin Buu in his own franchise, the fact is, that stands have nothing to do with ki, so since he doesn't have a stand of his own to defend himself, I'm assuming he can't just resist stand abilities with brute strength. And also, I didn't include Jojo or Dio, because even though they can stop time, I just don't imagine that they could do any real damage to Goku, even if they were to punch him for like an hour, never mind a few seconds. Although, if we're not going to leave any stones unturned though, then I suppose they could gouge Goku's eyes out or do internal damage during stop time, seeing as how stands can go through anything like a ghost would, and you know, even a guy like Zarbon still got blinded by sand falling into his eyes, but seeing as how fighters fly through clouds of debris all the time, I think we could chalk that up as a Toriyama botch. I know most people think it's obvious that Dio and Jotaro couldn't actually touch Goku, but I actually see a lot of people online who think otherwise, and I'm not sure whether or not they're trolling, but here you go, I addressed it. If you liked this video though, then you might like my video comparing Dragon Ball and Jojo as a whole, but that's all for now though, so if you'll excuse me, I've gotta go take a shit dump. Later.
So I want to say thank you to your loyalty, thank you for your support.